drive on our agenda alongside colleagues within our trust. So I'm going to hand over to Paul for the first keynote of the day. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, James. It was very kind of you to say that. Right, so my session today really is just to kind of launch this conference and really talk about our thinking. So I'm going to start off really today about our thoughts about why first, and then we'll lead into the sort of things that we're doing. So I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully this will keep up with me and work. Can you see that, James?
Yes.
Great, super. Okay, so the first thing really is what we found is making sure that we're over what I'd like to call partisan groupings. There's some real challenges that we face, and I think it always depends on how we approach that challenge. And I think this little picture here summarises how different people feel at different times. And sometimes we can feel really embraced by these changes, and sometimes we can feel less than warm, depending on our resilience levels and the things that we've got to do. So really, we've really got to think about, we know we've all got to make these changes and embrace these challenges, but how are we going to do that? But most importantly, for our profession and us as adults, how are we going to embrace this learning as adults? And I use the word as adults because there's also learning in our private lives that we're going to have to deal with over the next 5-10 years as artificial intelligence impacts on our life, automation happens more in our lives. We've also got that drive to keep up with society as it evolves. So it's all going to be about how we approach this, and hopefully if we're all keeping positive minded, we can approach it and embrace those changes. I think this graphic that I've got on here came out in just in 2018, actually, looking at the sort of jobs that would change. And if you have a look down the third column and look at the United Kingdom, the sort of jobs that would change and impact on us over the next 10 years, you could really see the skill sets that would need to shift and the type of things in the curriculum that we would need to provide our pupils in primary and our students in secondary. What is it that we would need to do, and what opportunities are there for people, and how do we respond to those? But all this was in the post-COVID world, but then since the COVID world, in February 21, a figure came out that 25% of workers are more likely than previously estimated to need to switch occupations. And I think we've seen that already with the vast number of people who have been furloughed for very long periods of time and may have missed out on this EdTech world, may have not ever even used Teams. They might have dabbled in Zoom and done some quizzes, but how have they kept up professionally? And then when they re-enter the job market, how are they now de-skilled that within a year, technology's moved on so fast that they've got things to learn? How does that affect families, and do our families keeping up in that educational development of technology? So life's changing really fast, and we need to think carefully about how that affects everybody. So really, we've got to really think about, keeping up needs to count for everybody. And I really mean that for adults and for pupils, because we need to be thinking about how are we building capacity within our schools, how are we building capacity to learn, how are we building capacity for parents to learn as much as children to learn, because that's what's going to empower them to narrow the disadvantage gap and maintain a good and healthy life and productive life. But this also comes at a cost. We know that many of our schools at the moment are suffering with children who are coming back with behavioural difficulties, emotional trauma. We know in our schools, as the weeks have gone by, that behaviour has got worse and more challenging because all the challenges at home are starting to manifest itself. So how do we look at people's well-being? How do we help them through technology and through understanding what they're doing to have a look at the whole well-being of a person so that they can be more productive? And one of the things that worries me for teachers is the lack of time for thinking space. So we need a tremendous amount of thinking space to think about what the generation needs, and all this is happening at pace. Changing is happening really, really fast, and are we able to keep up as educators? Are we able to keep up with the changes in the curriculum, the changes in the style of teaching? To give them what the children need, but also provide time for us as professionals to learn. And I think we've also got to keep an eye on the glimpse of the world for parents and that their children will operate in. The parents have no idea what's coming, what their world's going to be like, because we don't either. Nobody does. The pace of change is happening so fast, and their world of work would be unrecognisable for many children because of that exponential growth in change. So how do we give them the skills and the confidence and the self-agency to learn, and the self-efficacy to pick the new challenges up and deal with all the things that are thrown at them in the future as life gives us? So I think first and foremost, we've got to make sure we realise the benefits of change. I've got a deep-seated fear that we've made such amazing strides. I mean, in a year, it is what teachers have achieved across the land in all schools is truly sensational. But we're watching a generational shift unfold, and we're in a really unique position to influence this for the good and narrow the parts that is the challenging. I think someone's got their mic on. Could you just turn that, put your mic on mute for me, because I'm getting a bit of an echo. Thank you. So younger generations are much more likely to share things about their personal lives, both with peers and colleagues. That's a force for good, but it also can be a force for bad. So how do we, as professionals, make sure that change is for the good? And how can we educate people to make sure that they put all the safeguarding protocols in place? E-safety is an enormous piece of work that schools must embrace, and must embrace in a deep way alongside the EdTech revolution. Even if we don't have these hand in hand, we could be walking into some real dangers. There's key changes about community and what community means to people, what empathy means to people, and how we're going to work with different people across different lands, and how it's important to have self-efficacy, to take responsibility for oneself, to learn and to adapt, and to what their impact is on the world, so that they understand that everybody has a responsibility, and how they would then apply that in different situations. I think it's really important for us as well to think what approaches children are going to need, and how do we embrace those now and not just return back to what we've always done. I mean, there's a fantastic talk that I'm sure you've all remember seeing, Sir Ken Robinson on YouTube, when he talks about the Victorian education system. And I really hope over the next 10 years we can evolve that Victorian education system and the structures and the systems we have in place to really suit the needs and the challenges of children. So for us at Discovery, I feel like there's a big three themes that we're going to be dealing with over the next few years, and the first one really is what I call about leveraging. And that's about making sure that we leverage technology so we can unlock potential and new ways of teaching and learning. And it's not just becoming more technical. It's about how do we use the tools to make sure that we can learn better, faster, smarter, and also, most importantly, allow children a bit more choice. So a bit more choice to explore the things they're really interested in, and to do real life projects and see that the work they do can have an impact. I think we've got to build the capacity and make sure that we're building on the gains that we've made, and that continues to be development towards blended learning, and having a really clear picture about what that looks like. Hopefully we won't return to the days of full remote learning. There will be times when I'm sure we do, for the occasional snow days or other situations in school. But how do we build on what we've really learned? How do we maximise some of the great things that we've done? Because we want to really use all of this to ensure that the gap between schools it narrows, and the gap between children narrows. Because if we don't get this right, we could have a two-tier system in our country where we've got some schools who are forging ahead with great EdTech developments, and some children missing out on those things, and that would be very difficult to narrow the gap equally amongst all of our schools. So we really need to think about that. So I want to focus a bit more now on the leveraging technology. I think what we need to start thinking about is which platform or what apps are we using, and why are we using those apps, and not just choosing apps because that's the one I know, or that's the app that was easy, or that's the app that my friend recommended. Have we checked these platforms? Have we checked the ethical decision making? Where does the data go? Who uses that data? You know, if we're using a Google platform or we're using a Microsoft platform, what are they doing with that data? If we've found a new app that is a fantastic thing, you know, what are the safeguarding mitigations that we need to put in place to keep children safe? Because the tendency is that we can rush forward and use all of these apps without thinking about that first, because children's digital footprints are really going to count in the future. I'm really excited personally about virtual reality and using virtual reality to use it, how we could use that in the future, not just to see and experience new things and visit places that we may have never gone to, but as VR evolves, there'll be huge opportunities to deal with difficult situations. How do we become more human? How to trial out situations? How might have I dealt with that situation when I'm dealing with a difficult customer or a different person? Both at an adult level we could do that, but also as a child. I think I'm really looking forward to the future where we can use those situations so a child can deal with some situations and work out how to deal with things better. I think we need to be really considering adaptive learning, where the digital curriculum unfolds to suit the children's needs in terms of what it performs and how it quizzes. I mean, later on you'll hear from Paul Leahy and the Century Tech team. Our journey with that has been phenomenal, and how that has been really empowered some of our learners, our less confident learners, to allow their path to unfold for them, and the work that saved for teachers, but also the opportunities is opened at the end of the diagnostic assessments, and I'm sure he'll go into that a bit more. But also think about the user-generated content. So participants can add their ideas and look at project-based learning, how they can work together between schools. We've already got children working between our 13 schools who are sharing ideas and working together on projects. And I think that is deeply exciting and something we can really exploit and move forward together. That really empowers children, that their work counts, and that it's not just work in a book, but whatever they're producing as their outcomes is going to have a real difference and a real sense of purpose. The other thing is how are you going to use this technology to unlock new ways of teaching? So in a recent survey that came out, again, this was only in January and February time, that 4 out of 5 parents in America were really in favour of targeted interventions by schools that would overcome their social and academic and emotional skills outside of hours and inside of school, by using teachers from different schools and experts from different places to work with their children. I mean, there's a quote here from an 8th grader who said he actually preferred remote learning. He found it energizing. He found it allowed him to do more things and focus in a better way. There's lots of research saying that some introverted children have found the remote learning a real boost for them, and instead of falling behind, have actually consolidated some knowledge that they really needed to do that. And I think there's real opportunities now for us to harness the skills of all people, not just teachers. You know, the experts in the field that we know, the authors, the artists, who don't have to come and visit your school, but they can beam into the school and support the children in their work and have real access to people who can share their research and their knowledge. And then, you know, thinking about people having us as who are just natural born presenters. We have some people who are not teachers and have presented learning content because they're just naturally gifted in this particular area. And so what are the questions that we're considering for us to consider a way of teaching? I'm sure David will, as he follows me, will develop these thoughts further, but I think we're starting to consider how we're going to cover absences with adults. Do we need to revert to a supply teacher straight away? Can we broadcast lessons between schools for shorter period of times or even longer period of times? You know, we're starting to look at the differences between being a pastoral teacher and an academic teacher. Is the ways we can harness that to give a better offer for children and a different offer for children. So when an academic teacher might deliver most of the academic content or the learning content, but the pastoral teacher is the face-to-face teacher within their classroom who provides them the love and the care that primary children need and that liaison with parents. So it's a ways of splitting the traditional primary roles. And I think we need to be looking at how schools work together and what are those implications. 2 of our schools have shared their PPA time together and aligned their timetables. So in 2 different schools that are about half an hour to 45 minutes away, have joint PPA sessions together and shared learning directly between schools. And they've really benefited from that. Some of our inexperienced teachers have really benefited from working with an experienced teacher. And in 2-1 formentary schools, they've really benefited from that work sharing, opportunity that's brought. And I think using the digital tools for assessment is going to be vital for us in the summer term. How do we harness the diagnostic assessment power that Century brings and Forms brings and all the other tools we can use for assessment to help us diagnose where we need to focus, so we can really pinpoint what our groups of children need to do? And then I really hope that we're looking at how do we use better use of resident experts. We have a fantastic art leader in our school who, after Easter will be broadcasting to all 13 schools an art session twice a week, so we can really use her expertise to improve our teaching and learning. So the future for us at Discovery is really going to be adapting and aligning curricula where appropriate. And that doesn't mean we're going to do exactly the same, but what it means is let's align what's sensible, what's easy, and what's prudent. We need to make sure we continue doing small scale test and learn projects that can be upscaled. That's really important for us, and we did that with Century, and I'm really glad that we did with the Century, and then we upscaled it to all schools, and it had a much bigger impact because we didn't try and run before we could walk. And the temptation is to move at a pace too quickly. We have an aspiration that by September we're going to double PPA for all our teachers. So every teacher will have the equivalent of 4 hours of PPA a week, to allow 2 hours of traditional PA and 2 hours of professional learning time, to give them time to access all the MET courses, to access some coaching, direct coaching, and to keep up with the reading and the wealth of knowledge that's coming. We really want to, and we've really learned that working with and learning from the schools that we've supported in Edtech has really boosted our schools. And we want to work with as many schools as we can, because for whatever school we've worked in, whatever their starting point's been, we've equally learned as much as they have from those. And actually, quite often we've learned more, I think, in some cases from working with people. I think the potential for schools to work together is phenomenal, and I really hope that continues. I think for us at Discovery, we're building the confidence, the resilience to know that we're going to change multiple times. We will choose different platforms and they will change. We will choose different systems and practice and they will change as the learning and our approach to EdTech improves and evolves. But most importantly, we need to build the people with the right mindsets and the skills. So those people, going back to the first image of people who embrace that change and see it as exciting and dynamic. And as long as we're looking after people's well-being and we're giving them the time to learn, I really hope we can achieve that. So thanks for listening. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take those, and I hope I haven't gone over, James.
Paul, that was wonderful. Thank you. And you've managed to recover time, which was not even requested of you, so thanks very much for doing that. There's some really thought-provoking stuff in there, particularly around access to people we wouldn't ordinarily have access to, without the need for travel, without the need for across different time zones, things that business has been looking at for a number of years that are now very much available to us as schools. And I know recently we had speakers from the BBC join our People Parliament, for example, which was something we probably wouldn't have had happen before because it was an easy thing to do. So some really interesting stuff. So I've dropped a question or a comment in the chat bar there, and Paul, probably if colleagues have got things they want to reflect on or questions they want to ask, probably while David's talking, perhaps you can answer those questions as the session goes on.
Okay, sure.
Super, but thank you very much. That was great, and I'm sure that there's definitely some food for thought there for speakers. So without further ado, then I'm gonna, and actually